Patty Ferry is Marshall Keith's wife's name, right?
I don't think we're unmuted.
Just a minute, we're on.
Hey, how's everybody doing? Good afternoon.
Sounds fun, you can hear that.
Thanks for, there you go. There you go. That's what we like to hear. A lively fucking audience. Welcome to the Palisades Hub, everybody. I'm Mark Seagraves. I am one of the volunteers here at the Palisades Hub. How many are here at the Hub for the very first time? That is awesome. Don't be a stranger. There are things going on here at the Palisades Hub related to music all the time. We do backstage about once a month, and then downstairs we have the Palisades Hubcap Center, which is a concert series that we have. As a matter of fact, I can tell you what's coming on down there in the coming days. April 13th, the Vikings will be downstairs. Saturday, May 4th, Alice Despard and Marshall Keith, who's with us this evening. And then Saturday, June 29th, the one and only King Soul. And Mark Noon from King Soul is with us this afternoon. So we love that. We have a great spring summer series for backstage coming up on April 21st. It'll be a conversation with Ronnie Newmeyer, the great musician and concert producer. We'll talk about Woodstock to the White House. Let's see, May 19th, we have the Slicky Boys are coming back. You're not going to want to miss that either. And then on June 2nd, we have George Pelicanos. And while George is an author, there will be a band playing with him, a punk band, who's going to be a one-time collaboration of 4 great artists, and we're really looking forward to that. And the same with Ronnie Newmeyer. There's going to be a great combo of musicians he's worked with over the years who will be playing at that. And who knows what will happen when the Slicky Boys get together and come back here. So we appreciate that. But we are a nonprofit here at the Palisades Hub. So we depend very much on you buying tickets to our shows and making donations, which you can do with any means, cash, cards, checks, phones, whatever you've got, we will take your money from you. I also want to note and give a big shout out to all our volunteers, because nothing here at the Palisades Hub, either the Hubcap Center or backstage, happens without the volunteers, the people who took your tickets, the people who are getting you beverages, the people who put the chairs out. Those are all volunteers, and give them a big round of applause. Let them know how appreciated they are. This show, the Urban Verb Show, would not happen if not for 2 people in specific who played a big role in that. My partner, Linda Coquinos, who put this all together. She also produces Palisades Hubcap Center concert series downstairs. And then the one and only Bob Boylan here is helping us out technically. Bob did a backstage a few months ago, and he's with Chris Thompson, who's here, and they lived to tell about it. So, and he came back. They both came back. So we appreciate that. But we've had a great series over the past year here with Backstage, and we're looking forward to doing more and more of these. I will point out this artwork, these posters that you see up front here hanging off the screen. These are all up for a silent auction today. These are all original artwork, vintage posters. from B-52's concerts to CBGB to 930 Club. You can start bidding on them at the break or after the show. We do have minimum bids on a couple of them. We know how valuable these are, so don't try to go cheap on these. All the money that we get from these posters will go to support the music programs here at the Hub. So it's all going to a good cause. And we want to thank Susan Marquis for donating 4 of these posters. And speaking of Susan, she will be here with the Slicky Boys. So you'll be seeing her if you come back for the Slicky Boys. And Linda France donated one of these as well, the CBGB poster. So we really appreciate them making those donations to us. We want you to bid often, bid high, bid till it hurts, because we really, really, really do need your money. With that said, I would also notice we do have some merch over here. The flame-proof mascaras. You all know about the flame-proof mascaras, right? Abad Baram, Marshall Keith, and Roddy put out a new album. This is the first time you're able to get it. It's in red vinyl, limited edition, and it's here for 20 bucks. So you're going to want to buy these while you still can. So we appreciate them. And we'll hear a little bit off of that album at the break too. So we're going to do 2 sets, about 45 minutes each, take about a 10-minute break in between. I would remind you, bathrooms are downstairs and there's beverages out in the lobby if you are so inclined. You are able to drink and eat in here, so don't be shy. There you go. Raise a glass and enjoy yourself. So did we bring cards out for questions? Questions from the audience? We're going to get cards, some index cards with some pencils and pass them around before the second set. And if you guys have questions of your own, if you write them in really big font so I can read them, very legible and pertinent to the conversation, there's a good chance that we'll ask your question in the second half after the break. So we'll have those cards out here for you to write your questions down. With that, the reason you all are here, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Urban Verbs. Or not.
That's not what they were introducing them. Don't shush them, okay? Please. This is hard enough to sit.
So apparently the Urban Verbs left. Have a good night, everybody. Thanks for coming. The Urban Verbs. And here's Roddy coming to us virtually. This is the first time we've done a virtual interview with anybody. What could possibly go wrong? Everybody say, hey, Roddy.
Say hello.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming out tonight.
All right, good night.
And of course, we have Linda France, Robin Burns, and Danny Frankel here in the flesh. There you go. There you go.
Did you bring the light? Did you turn it on?
Mine's on.
You're good? All right. So again, don't stress if anything goes wrong, we will fix it. See, we got a bot in here already taking care of business for us.
Wow, thank you. Wow.
This is
All
gotta
right.
be me.
So-
in the making.
Verbs, thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate you coming from near and far. We know some of you traveled, some of you didn't, but you're all here and we very much appreciate that. And so let's start. Linda, I'm going to start with you. We're going to just get to kind of know a little bit about pre-urban verbs with all of you. Linda, tell us a little bit about where you're from and what you were doing leading up to the verbs.
Well, probably mostly running away from stuff. Let's see, I went to art school in Rhode Island, and when I came back, I didn't want to just be an illustrator in New York, so I went to Paris, where it was really hard because I couldn't get papers. So then I came back to New York, and from New York ended up back in Washington, and I moved into my sister's apartment, which was below Robin's, and so that's how I got to know Robin, and we just goofed off for a while until he was hanging out, I guess, with Robert, right?
Yeah.
And they needed a bass player because everybody
And
plays
you'd
guitars.
always wanted to be a bass player in a rock and roll
Oh, I
band.
thought about it constantly. Yeah, it kept me up at night. You know, how will I do this? What does it look like? Yeah, he bought me my first bass. I played really bad classical guitar up until then. And then Robin said, well, you need a bass. So we went to a pawn shop and spent $100 on a blue Fender Mustang, which I was told was what Tina Weymouth used. which, you know, you must have told me that. And, but anyway, I really liked playing bass. It was really fun. Without a bass and bottom, you don't have rock. But you can be me. I was very shy and I could just be back there and let Roddy do his thing and Robin do his thing, you know, and Danny's behind me. We wore earplugs though, both of us. That's why we can still hear you even if,
I'm sorry?
yeah. Enunciate. Anyway, that's my thing. Grew up in Kensington. My sister and brother are here somewhere. And, that's kind of my scene.
And so you had never played bass before joining the
No,
band?
it was just fun.
You were kind of learning while
Oh,
you were
yeah,
flying?
definitely. I felt like that was one of the nice things about this group, that nobody ever made me think I couldn't do it. It was just more like, well, here's how you play bass. Okay, it's got these 4 strings and it'll kill your fingers for a while, and you know. But I learned all that music reading. I hated doing it. Bass is so much about what you hear and the sense of time, and that I seem to be okay with that, and that was fun.
Do you still play bass?
No, I play guitar a lot with my husband, but I don't play bass.
What happened to the bass?
Well, I still have it. Yeah, I have a wonderful Spectre bass numbered that we bought in New York because the bass I had, the Rickenbacker, took so long to tune up. And Michael Thorne insisted on us changing the strings. Yes, the bass, every day. So you're doing that, and it was insanely irritating with that. It had a preamp in it. It was just a pain in the. So they had a bass there that they had, what was his name? That guy, AC/DC or something, the other one, Aerosmith. Yeah, their bass player hated it because it was black. Well, that's perfect for me. So it was a Spectre bass. It was numbered, and the guy there knew somebody who did it, and so they sold it
So you
to me.
recorded using AC/DC's bass?
It was my bass.
It was your
Excuse me.
Okay.
Yes, it was that. They didn't like it. They rejected it because of the color, and that was, I loved it. They sold me the bass with a make-believe anvil case for $350.
Do you still have that?
You bet.
Right on. All right. Robin, how about you? Tell us a little bit about where and what you were doing before you joined the Urban Verbs.
I left Florida in 1976, and I finished graduate school, and my best friend Terry, we'd lived in a commune right at the Georgia border, probably as far south as you can possibly get. And Terry was good friends with Bob Rauschenberg, had been Rauschenberg's assistant. And so right out of graduate school, he said, let's go down and visit my friend Bob in Captiva. And I didn't know who he was talking about when he said Bob. And I don't know if you, I guess some of you know, Rauschenberg's a famous American artist. So we drive the 260 miles down from Tallahassee to Captiva in Terry's 1949 Chevrolet. And I remember driving up, I said, just pull it up. Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, excuse me, we need to be heard. No, I'm good. Is that better? Yeah.
Thank you.
So I remember Terry saying, you know, Bob is this artist and he's a friend of mine. And of course, I didn't know who he was talking about. We get there and screen door opens, this incredible modern house right on the water. And screen door opens and there's Bob Rauschenberg. Terry. I think, fuck, that's Bob Rauschenberg. You know, I'm an artist. It's like Jimi Hendrix, right? So anyway, as time went on, eventually Terry and Bob were back in Florida a lot, and I'd gone to finish college, and I wanted to make it as an artist in New York. And so Terry says, "Why don't you go to New York, and you can stay at the church on Lafayette Street. Bob and I are going to be down in Captiva." So I get in my van and I drive from Florida to New York, and I stay in the loft in Lafayette Street. Wild and crazy would be an understatement. Being over, you know, one should never be where one does not belong. Sashka, the Japanese houseboy, would scream in the middle of the night. He had a big Akita dog, and they would run around the floor and scream. And he had knives that he would throw on the floor. And I'm thinking, fuck, and this guy used to knock on the door. Teddy was 6'2", and he says, what do you want to do tonight? And I'd say, not quite yet, Eddie, I'm not quite ready. And so, you know, it was, by the time I left New York, I was just completely freaked out. And my mother said, why don't you call Barbara, who lives in Georgetown? And Barbara had inherited this wonderful house from her husband. The caveat being that Chip, her son, was living on 2 floors above her, bivouacking. He was still not quite back from Vietnam. So I knew the reason she wanted me to stay there was to put somebody between herself and her son. That was me. I had the whole floor in Georgetown, this incredible house. And so I set up a studio. I started painting. I met Michael Clark and Joe White and Kevin McDonald. And then somehow I got down to DuPont Circle and I met Linda. And then one day I was at Henri Gallery, which is over on R Street and 21st. Henri had painted the entire gallery black. And Henri only wore black. And she had a t-shirt that said, she was 81. She said, it said, not boring. And so she would have a vodka at night. You'd go out at 5 o'clock when the gallery closed. She was like a vampire. You'd come out and you'd go over there and the bottle of vodka would come out and you get trashed. And I'd only have a block to walk away back to my house. So one day I was there and Robert Goldstein showed up. Robert, our leader, God bless him, was hanging artwork. Now, this is a guy who just graduated from Georgetown University with a degree in foreign service. How's that for an expensive education? So he's hanging art, and I'm hanging around, and we're talking about music. And one thing led to another. And I said, wow, this guy really, he's cool. He knows, you know, a lot of the stuff I liked. And he said, you know, I'm putting together a band with Roddy and Danny. Why don't you, you know, get together, we'll jam one night. And so we jammed in a little bit. Robert went over some songs and stuff. And the next thing I know, Linda, Danny, and I, and Robert and Roddy are the Urban Verbs. And we're playing all around DC in oddball places, not your average place. We kind of were inventing our own venue because there wasn't no place for the kind of music we were playing.
Yeah, all right. And Danny, how about you?
For the Urban Verbs, Bobby Radcliffe is this guy that meant a lot to me in that band. When I joined, he said, I want you to get a Charlie Parker record and a Sam record.
Is it on? Is your mic on? There should be a green light.
Yeah, there we go. We're good.
Okay,
You're lit.
Root Boy Slim, I played on Zoom, that record. I didn't get credited. I played percussion. I like doing that a lot as well. That's why I kept really busy. I've just been open to all that. And I didn't get credited. And also, he said, one of the guys, he said it would pay me $15. So like around 6 weeks later, I go to the studio, and then out of his shirt pocket, he pulls out a 10. He said, here's a 10. I owe you 5. But before then, I was in different bands, like bands with funny names, and we a few times we played behind Root Boy. Oh, actually, the first time I saw him, it was with Bobby Radcliffe at Cousin Nick's on 14th and Decatur. It was 73, and Root Boy came in with a cape, and he was really drunk and he fell on the floor. And
Root Boy drunk?
We're probably talking about a different person, right? Foster McKenzie, the third. But there's that, and then and before then, I had studied with Paul Modian. He called himself that then. The guy in the legendary Bill Evans trio. I seeked him out. I'm going backwards. I went to school in Rhode Island also, and I saw him with that Keith Jarrett American Quartet at Brown University, and I just approached him. And just around 2 years, I took a bus or a train to New York from DC or Rhode Island and do that. And before that, like in high school, I was with a lot of friends. We'd always get like Sun Ra Records or Art Ensemble or a lot of these. I like the crossover thing, like jazz guys that play rock or rock guys that would do jazz. I think Mose Allison, the Seventh Son, that tune, when I heard that, I really liked that, because the way the drummer would flip the backbeat around, it wasn't always on tune 4. I was like that. Before that,
Paul again,
what?
Paul, from the symphony.
Oh yeah, Fred Begun. That was after the Verbs though.
Was that after? Thought you were doing that before?
Yeah, then there was I was doing a lot of accompanying for a dance company. It's like around town. That was really fun. I met a lot of cool people. And then
Carla
Carla Perla,
who I went
you
to
know her?
school with, yeah. She was in Kensington, all the same schools.
She was married to Steve Bloom.
And she's a great dancer, did all that dancing.
And one of the dance places, it wasn't dance project, it became dance place. It was one across the street.
18th Street, right?
Yeah, 18th Street Studio. And it used to be called the Showboat Lounge.
Yeah, yeah.
My father took me there to see Gene Krupa. It was really great. It was,
Wow.
I think he was down on his career. It was just him with a trio, and he played kind of subdued, but it was great. It was like seeing a movie and like a real guy, I could tell.
Yeah.
And then, but I was born in Cleveland, and then when I was 10, we moved to the Maryland area, and then moved into DC after high school, because that's where everything was happening. I thought it was great.
You mentioned the Showboat Lounge. I would be remiss, and Jeff Krulik would never forgive me, who's here, one of the great documentary filmmakers in our midst, that the Showboat was right across the street from the Ambassador Theater.
Yeah,
which has-
is that where the bank is now, right?
Yes, it's where the SunTrust Bank Plaza is, which is under much dispute, and we won't go down that rabbit hole. Roddy, are you still with us?
Still here.
All right. Roddy, what brought you to Washington, D.C., and what were you doing prior to joining the Urban Verbs?
Went to American Youth.
I was a creative writing student at American University, and I'd wanted to be a poet since I was 13 years old. And so I continued to write poetry there. I also did poetry performances that were inspired by Patti Smith, who I would see in New York every time I went up there to visit my family. And I put a couple of shows on using dancers and sort of jazz music backgrounds, but I really wanted to form a rock band. And I ended up forming one with some other American University students called The Controls. And The Controls lasted one show, and I was told that my services would no longer be needed. And you know, I think they all came to regret that, because they saw what happened with the band that had born with me. And I just want to say it's really great to see Linda, Robin, and Danny tonight. You know, these are people who I spent the most creative years of my life with, and I really like all three of them. But Washington had a very small music scene at that time, and everyone knew everyone else by and large. And I had gone to see a band at what was it called, the Back Alley, something like that, in College Park, and I saw Raz was holding forth that night, and I went out to leave, and Robert Goldstein was sitting on a low wall outside of the front door, and I knew who he was because I'd see him playing with this band, The Look, and I knew that he heard a particularly distinctive guitar sound, and so I said to him, never having met him, we both knew who each other were, but we'd never met. I said, so Robert, when are you going to get off your ass and do something? And Robert called me 2 days later and said that he is putting together a country western band and would I like to audition for it? And I said, I don't audition for bands, but if you'd like me to come up where you're playing, you guys can audition for me. I I was a very brass young man at that time. And we ended up getting together and forming the Urban Verbs. And the rest of it, Mark, was just magical. I mean, there's no other way to look at it, I don't think. Robert knew Paul Parsons, the man who owned the 930 building, because he had had a studio there where he framed art and prepared it to be moved across the country or to Europe or wherever within the country. And so he knew Paul Parsons, the owner, and he knew that Paul Parsons had a club space on the first floor there, which was the 930 Club. It wasn't called that at first. It was called the Atlantis Club, named after the Atlantis building that it was in. And we talked to Paul a couple of afternoons and said, "Hey, Paul, if you're interested, we can book your club space, and you can have the proceeds from the bar, and we'll split the dorm funds with the bands who are playing." And so that's how the 930 Club, then the Atlantis Club, got started, largely because of Robert's connection with Paul Parsons. And from that point forward, for me at least, it was just a period of great creativity and great magic. You know, I'd been spending a lot of time in New York with my family at CBGB's, and I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to start a band that didn't sound like any other band, and I wanted to start a club that would be a place for people like my band and other bands to play. And there really wasn't a club like that in Washington, at least that I was aware of. So we got Paul to allow us to book the Atlantis Club, and we then went on to do that a couple of times, and someone else eventually took that over, but did a much better job probably than we could have done. And we needed a place to practice, and there was a really, really funky basement in the Atlantis building. And we had to put wood crates down with plywood over top of it so that the water that leaked into the building wouldn't wreck our equipment. And there's a pit bull who lived in that building, and pit bulls, you may know, are terrific ratters. You know, they were used throughout history to contain the rat population. And so Paul Parsons had a pit bull down in the basement named Red, and Red would kill all the rats that came in from the excavation of the subway system. And it was just all bizarrely magical. And we started playing at the 930 Club. We were the first band to play there with the Slicky Boys and who was the third band that night?
White Boy.
Yeah, White Boy. And there was a hunger for that kind of space in that kind of location that wasn't suburban in any way, shape, or form. It was a very urban space in a very urban section of downtown Washington. And it just began to take off. And because we had started it by booking it, we had sort of pick of the best of the upcoming opportunities. And it was just great to have a place where we could go and I could drink for free, and the band held forth there about once a month for about a year, I guess. And after that, it wasn't quite a full year. We went up to CBGB's to play there. That was kind of a mecca that you went and you paid your fealty to. And we went up there, we played, I think it was just one set. It may have been two sets, but regardless, Brian Eno was in the audience that night, and he
Well,
would,
now you're getting ahead of the program. Let's hold.
But like before the early chapter, wasn't there a place called the Bond Building on 14th in New York that you and me and Robert, I think Johnny Bethesda rehearsed that a few times? And then from
Yeah,
there,
right, yeah.
and then from there, it went to
Yeah.
the Atlantic Building.
Let me ask, and I'll put this out to anybody who wants to answer it. When I spoke to each of you individually on the phone before this, there was one band that each of you, I believe, mentioned to me as being an influence and as being kind of centric to that time, and that was the Raz.
Yeah, I was gonna
Michael.
say how
Yeah.
much I was sorry and shocked that Reedy died.
You know, it was a tough month for
Sorry.
Washington DC's music
Very
scene,
shocked.
and losing Mike Reedy was
Sad.
a big part of that
Those
loss.
guys
Yeah.
were great.
Robin, you want to talk a little bit
Yeah,
about
I
the
mean,
Raz?
Robert, one day Robert says, let's go over to the Keg. I'd never been to the Keg. It was in Georgetown on Wisconsin Avenue. And it was I've been in rock and roll bands since I was 16 years old, and I've played a lot of places like the Keg. You know, you walk in, it's kind of familiar, you know, it's kind of one of those. Yeah, and they were playing, there was probably 8 people there. And these guys were incredible. If they'd been anywhere but Washington, you would have known about them long before before now. I mean, they were, Abad, where's Abad? The guy, incredible stylistic moves with the guitar that I'd never seen anybody do anything like that short of Keith Richards. I mean, it was like, and Michael was the premier frontman. Excellent conceptual artist, far more than just a mouthpiece for the band. I mean, the guy's a great artist and a wonderful songwriter. And the rest of the guys were really good. It was a great band. Boy, that really inspired me because I hadn't seen anybody in the DC area like that playing kind of a much more original approach to their music. You know, I'd seen a lot of music around here, but I hadn't seen that. And that kind of really, I think, lit a fire under Robert and I. It made us a far more competitive, maybe, if you use that term. And man, if those guys can do it, we can do it, you know, that kind of thing. But yeah.
Who wants to talk a little bit about Robert? Because I want to take time to talk about Robert. Roddy, do you want to talk a little bit about Robert?
yeah, I'd love to. Robert was one of the most confined yet open artists that I've ever worked with. And he was not very outgoing about his own personal life, but he was able to communicate complex musical ideas to 4 people who I think only Danny really had a full understanding of what Robert was on about. And he also welcomed Robin buying a synthesizer. I don't know if that was the first synthesizer in Washington or not, but there weren't a lot of them around back in those days. And Robin bought an ARP Odyssey synthesizer and began adding synth parts to our songs that were complementary of the guitar parts that Robert was writing.
And, you know, each of you mentioned, I think, at least 3 of you were artists before, in poets or artists. Can you talk about art and the art scene and how it influenced both your music, but also your audiences? I mean, we see the Corcoran Gallery, you played there several times. How big of a factor was art for the urban verbs?
Our first gig that I remember was playing a New Year's Eve party from 77 to 78 in Mark Clark's studio. And it was, I think we had 2 songs, maybe 3, I can't remember. But I remember that it was, you know, I'd never played in front of anyone. I wouldn't even play my guitar if I heard someone in the hallway. So this was sort of like, whoa. But we had just a great time, and the art people understood what was going on, or if they didn't care. I mean, understand it or not, it's moving, it's got a super solid bottom, interesting top, great singing. What the hell, you know? And so that was really, they had a big big part of what we were doing was playing to artists.
And you were drawing from the art scene rather than the music scene. Is it Robin, right?
I'd say so.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
That helps shape
Yeah.
our playing. I think when, we were kind of like making a new language, I thought, you know,
Yeah.
and when I do a drum fill, I thought it was like a signal, you know, to a change of the tune more than just, that common thing, which is just totally great, but it was exciting. We were doing a new thing. It was like a fresh coat of
It's more
paint.
experimental.
And playing in untraditional venues
Yeah,
as,
and
as
we
well.
had a kind of a non-conventional audience too.
Well, we
in a
never,
way, you
we
know?
did what, one cover?
Yeah,
Our latest flame, that was a
I think we
cover.
played like 3 or 4 songs, 3 or 4 times each, to keep the party going.
Yeah, well, that time, yeah.
Maybe Tina Gray was
Yeah,
another
it
one.
was above the Bimbo Lounge, if you, anybody
Yeah,
can
I
remember
can-
that
yeah.
place. It was, Mark had a loft
Legendary.
above the Bimbo, one of the funkiest places downtown DC. You know, one of those kind of places you walk in, somebody's sitting there at noon, you walk in at 5, they're still sitting there. You know, and like that.
It's the same drink.
Yeah, it was wild. I mean, yeah, we had most of our, I mean, for me, I mean, you know, I remember, this is just a little anecdote, but when I was in graduate school, I had a professor, Trevor Bell. And Trevor looked like Alan Bates. I don't know if anybody knows Alan Bates. I mean, this guy was as cool as a cucumber, as good looking, you know, a guy you've ever imagined. And he had that English accent, and he was a really good painter. And he said to me one day, Robin, you know, you'd be a damn good painter if you just quit doing this music thing. You know, I did a music thing. I was a jazz guitar player in London. And Richard Smith came up to me and said, well, Trevor, you've got to go down to St. Ives and make a, you know, the thing and be an artist, my friend. And he says, I had this, one of my students, this Brian Eno. And I told this Brian Eno kid the same thing. And this was, I never even knew who Brian Eno was. This was 1972. And so then 10 years later, not 10 years later, 6 years later, I meet Brian Eno, and we're talking about Trevor Bell. And he said, did he say that to you? And he said, yes, he said that to me. And I was thinking, wow, you know,
Things come
don't
full
do it,
circle.
Robin, don't do it. You can't do both. I should have listened.
Roddy, let me ask you about being from DC, being a band from DC, particularly when you got outside, when you got to New York City. Did being a band from DC hold the band back? Was it a plus or a minus for the band?
I think it was very definitely a minus. And I think because all of the bands that were making waves were from either New York City or Los Angeles at that time. There weren't a lot of exceptional bands from other cities. And what you find out if you live in Washington and spend time in New York or really anywhere else is that people don't really understand Washington. They have no idea how dynamic a city it is and how great the people are. And so we were sort of judged by that misunderstanding. And we're we're also judged by a accident of birth on my part.
You go ahead, go on down that road. Tell us about your brother.
Yeah, Chris is my older brother by 4 years, and he's been my hero ever since I was a very, very young child. And when he went to RISD to go to school, I wanted to go to RISD. And my parents said one night over dinner, well, we think that one artist in the family is enough. So I thought, oh, I see, I'm fucked. Well, in that case, I'm not sure where I want to go to school. And I didn't end up staying in school because there was nothing that grabbed my attention the way art did. But they began playing at a little club called CBGB's, and very soon were signed to Sire Records for a couple of album deals. And they really climbed their way to the top of the ladder. They were considered almost inexplicably weird in their early days. And as they got more polished as musicians, that misunderstanding, I think, cleared itself up. And they began to find fans all over the country and all over the world. So when I thought it was time for us to go to CBGB's, I talked to Chris and I said, who do you know at CBGB's? And he said, well, Hilly Crystal is a good friend of mine. And I said, that's nice. Who's Hilly Crystal? And Hilly Crystal, as a lot of people will know, was the owner of CBGB's, and he did all the booking there. And Chris said, why don't I give you Hilly's number? You give him a call and see if he has a date that you all could come up and play. And so that's what we did. And it was a great show, especially because
and just so if anybody missed it, Chris is in the Talking Heads. This is the band you're talking about.
yeah, yeah.
So, but you're saying that that was also a negative for your band?
Oh, it absolutely was.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the review that Tom Carson did, and for those who don't know, Tom Carson is a walking piece of dog shit.
All right, fasten your seatbelts, ladies and gentlemen. Here we go.
He took
You know,
a
I was going to tiptoe around the Rolling Stone review, but since you bring it up, so I guess it's 1980. Is that about right? After your first album comes out, Tom Carson, who hailed from our area, now retired, living in New Orleans, wrote a review in Rolling Stone of your first album.
It wasn't a
I'm
review.
guessing you didn't love that review.
It wasn't a review. It was an assassination.
Yeah, it
And
was
in
a
fact,
hatchet
people,
job. Absolutely.
you're
hatchet.
just the worst kind of hacket job. And people who worked at Warner Brothers told us later that Warner Brothers had called Rolling Stone and said, look, if you publish any more reviews like that, we're not going to advertise in your magazine anymore. And they were one of the huge revenue sources for Rolling Stone in those days. And it's because Carson shot himself in the foot, really. And I gather he's written some books since that time. I wouldn't read them, but
For those of you who have not had the joy and pleasure of reading Tom Carson's review in Rolling Stone, I will characterize it as a journalist and the son of a music critic as one of the most vulgar, insulting, offensive reviews that took personal attacks, particularly at you, Roddy, that I have ever read in my life. Is that a fair characterization of the review?
Absolutely, yeah.
I talked to each of you about this, and I think a couple of you just said it was a hatchet job. What were your thoughts about this review when you
Well,
first?
I said that funny thing. Maybe Robin told me that, you know, those guys, Suicide, that duo, they was it you just that they approached Robin or one of us, and they said they bought the record because the review was just so out there. You know, they'd never seen a review that fucked up.
Yeah, it was awful.
So
Really
there's
terrible.
that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's pretty.
And Linda, do you remember reading that
Well,
review for the
yeah,
first
I
time?
hadn't read it, and we were staying, or you guys were staying in some
Gramercy Park.
place, and I was
They were about to
staying up.
play at the River
Yeah,
Peninsula.
so I had it, and Roddy, and we were in some room, and I read it out loud, not having any idea what I was about to read, and Roddy's standing there, as I remember this, and you'll remember, Roddy, because you put your hand right through the window. And then off you went to, I guess it was Bellevue, I'm not sure, but you know, to sew it up. And it was just an absolute honest reaction to a very, very foul
Yeah.
Yeah.
thing. It just was so unnecessary to write that. But, oh
Tina-
well,
I think a lot of
Tina
people.
put her fist through the glass.
Right.
yeah,
You punched the window out, Roddy, is that right? And had to
I
go to the
did,
hospital for
yeah,
stitches.
yeah.
yeah.
Right. So I've been in contact with Tom Carson in the past week.
Did you invite him?
Well, no, I did not.
Oh, shoot.
I know.
Too late.
He's retired, living in New Orleans. Roddy, right? He actually went on to write several novels, had a very
Good at novels.
illustrious career writing for magazines. If it's okay with you, I'll read what he wrote to me to pass on to you guys. So I had reached out to Tom Carson, not telling him that I wanted to talk to him about the urban verbs, just that as a journalist in Washington, I wanted to talk to him He got back to me, asked me what it was about, and I told him it was an urban verbs, and was his reply. That's what I was afraid it was going to be. As I've said before, I deeply regret the crassly sophomoric tone of that review and am ashamed Rolling Stone printed it. You'd think they'd have known better, even if I didn't at age 22. I also regret that my dislike of Roddy's vocal posturing got in the way of appreciating the band's musical virtues, which were considerable. But that's all I want to say. He went on.
That sounds like an apology.
I'll leave it. I'll
Rod,
leave it.
that's an apology, Roddy.
I don't hear it as
Too
such.
late.
Roddy, does that sound like an apology?
No, no.
It's too little, too late.
Not enough.
And
not enough.
so what did that do? What impact did that have on the band? This is
It
after your
killed
first
us.
album, before your second release, right?
Killed us. There's no doubt in my mind that that review killed us, because at the time there was no internet. There were very few music magazines other than Rolling Stone.
Yeah, they're the
So if
hippest
you-
thing.
So if you get a hatchet job in Rolling Stone, that's what everyone's reading. And we had good reviews up until that time in the Toronto Sun and a number of other newspapers around the country. Those reviews dried up. No one had anything good to say about us after Tom Carson's review. So
Now,
I
did
don't
any of you know Tom Carson hailed from DC originally in Arlington? Did any of you know Tom before this?
I never
No.
met him or anything, but he lives with a person named Arian Berger. And I knew her in LA. She worked at the LA.
Also a writer, and I believe his
LA
wife knew,
Weekly.
yeah.
And she was like a really cool person. I think that both of them like drank a lot. But she seemed like actually kind of straight. You know, she's from Orange County, and I was playing every Friday night at the Mondrian Hotel, and then she'd come by or she'd write about it. You know, it just seemed like a ordinary person. And then I was really surprised when I thought, like, this the same Tom Carson? You know?
Did you guys think there was a motive behind this beyond just writing a
I-
review?
Yeah, I thought so. I thought maybe there's something in the past that happened, like maybe someone, I don't know, dissed somebody else or.
Well,
I don't-
DC was a small and pretty, I mean, bands might have liked each other, but there was a lot of competition and a lot of, well, they're the most boring band on earth or whatever comments. And so it could easily have been something personal. I certainly don't know, but maybe someone pissed him off. Who knows?
Robin, did you think there was something behind it? You're nodding in the affirmative. You want to just leave it there, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Robert had tried to put a band together before, right out after he graduated from college, called The Look.
Oh, yeah. he
And
did.
I think there was some issues there with a bass player or something, and it seemed like a setup. I mean, anybody that thinks that politics are not involved in the art world, or be honest, or naive. I mean, there's all kind of politics. There's the Washington, D.C., New York axis. You know, I used to say New York is the jitterbug and Washington is a waltz. Couldn't be any more different. You know, how you react in both places, you know. And there was that. Somebody, you know, Roddy's politics at the time were very liberal and very straightforward. And there was somebody that said to us that we were like, what was it? Bless your Republican heart, Roddy. Do you remember some asshole said, this is something that was like just really offensive to us? You know, they took for granted who and what we were, right? We lived in the Washington, D.C. I've had people tell me when on the road, you mean people actually live there? I said, yeah, there's 600,000 people that live there. You know, they see the edifices, and this is Washington in many people's minds. So there was that kind of dialogue between New York and their artistic intelligentsia, and then us seeming like the ultimate outsiders, but we're coming in with the blessing of Warner Brothers, the biggest record company in the world at the time.
Who had no idea
And,
what to
and
do with us.
just out of nowhere, we get a record contract that most people would just, unbelievable. And even for us, I mean, we didn't, you know, we were, it was a project, and it was an experience, and we were an experimental band. We didn't really know where this thing was going to lead, but it happened very quickly. Right, Roddy? What, 9 months?
yeah, no, I mean, that's why it was so magical. Things just kept dropping into place. I mean, meeting Brian Eno in New York, there couldn't have been a better producer for us to have met. He did 2 songs. He mixed 2 songs of ours. They're on YouTube, and he would have done a record with us, but he was getting ready to go to Africa with David Byrne. So we sort of lost out on that opportunity.
Roddy, I'm going to give you the last word on Tom Carson and the review. Did you think there was a motive behind his review?
Yes, I did. I didn't see how anyone could write anything as vituperative as that and not have a motive. I mean, it was just, you've read it. It was just awful. And people in the record business said they'd never seen anything like it. I mean, even when New York reviewers were slagging Led Zeppelin, this was nothing compared to what Carson wrote about us. And he claims he apologized to me one time in a letter, but it wasn't really an apology. It was sort of a badly written AA apology. And he said, he concluded it by saying, well, we were both young at that time, and you were young and I was young. I don't know what he meant by that. Yeah, we were all young at that time, but somehow our youth was reason enough to peg that horrible review on us, and it killed the careers of 5 promising musicians. I mean, I will just never forgive him for that. We were getting ready to make a second album, and it just completely killed our career as a band.
It undermined us with our record company, who didn't know what to do with us as it was.
Yeah, they already wanted
And they're
us to
waiting
wear
for some sort of
outfits.
sign, and then the sign they got was this, Roddy said, vituperous tome that just put all the A&R people right out the door. And everybody said, wait a minute, I don't know if I want my name attached to these guys. And the thing about it is they didn't know how to deal with us. They wasn't a model. The closest model would have been the Talking Heads, or maybe, I don't know, Ultravox or Magazine, or a couple of these English bands that were kind of in the new wave sort of thing. But the Warner Brothers didn't know how to promote us. So they were waiting for some sort of sign. And I assumed the sign would be a good review. And when they didn't get that sign, everybody in the A&R department kind of like really stepped back from us, and we were really on our own then. And it was, it was very strange, to be honest with you, but it was really decisively destructive.
Well, it's good to see you guys don't dwell on this review at all. And I appreciate your candor
Asked him to come up here.
and talk. He does deny that there was any motive that maybe harkens back to DC or Arlington versus DC bands and the look and whatnot. I did put that to him. We're going to take a break in a moment, but Ronnie, you mentioned recording a demo with Brian Eno, and we're going to get to that in the second half. But before we do, Bob, let's listen to a little bit there were 2 songs. Is that right, that you guys recorded with Eno after the CBGB?
No, we recorded a whole set. The 2 songs were the 2 that he took uptown.
Now, let me ask you
He
while he's queuing this up, you recorded the entire set?
Brian bought a mobile unit down to CBGB's. Hilly let us go in after hours. We recorded an entire set straight through, no stops.
And
no
so where
starts.
is that? Where can we listen to that?
Who knows? I mean, that would be the great thing to listen to. And I thought we did really a great job. And then Brian took it uptown. Roddy, you went with Brian, right? And then you redubbed the
I did not. The next I heard from Brian was the following morning. He typed up a 2-page letter of praise for us, saying, I'd rather be working with you right now than with myself. And
It's a remarkable letter that I posted this morning on Facebook for anybody to read. It is both typed and handwritten with edits and notes. It is absolutely
It's a piece.
an incredible document to read, and it gives you great insight into the band and to Eno and to their relationship. Bob, which song are we going to do? So let's hear a little bit of Next Question, one of the 2 songs you recorded a demo with.
thank you.
What will we do when we find love? Sit in the morning, maybe talk about honest feelings. But go around and around and around, like everyone. It's too hard to spend. There are predict reality. Not comfortable. Not easy. I guess so. Whenever you're shiver, shiver. Shiver, shiver. If this is love. And not some sky. You were killing us. I'll get you more cold. What did they say?
All right, the urban verbs. We're going to take a short 10-minute break. I want to remind everybody that you can bid on these posters. There's a silent auction. You can go in the back and bid on these posters. Again, all that money will go to support music here at the Hub. These guys are going to come back in about 10 minutes. We're going to talk about playing for the vice president, touring the world, Hall of Nations, B-52s, all the good stuff coming up in just a couple of minutes. Stick with us. And so during the break, we're going to listen to Flameproof Mascara, which is on sale up here in limited edition red vinyl.
Break out the window, blow down the walls, paving the road, smoking the halls. Come on now, baby, come along. I want your help just to sing this song. Fearless women will take just mark the dawn of a new era. Come on, baby, come along. I need your help just to sing this song. The only choice is the winners, the walls, paving the road. Come on now, baby, come along. I want your help just to sing this song. Fearless women wearing from myself. Mark the dawn of our new era. Come on now, baby, come along. I need your help just to sing this song. The only choice is these years are used to it well. But I came to this morning from top of the world. Another beautiful thing was leaving my eyes. Let my it's been loneliness, it's been so kind with my phone at my side, stupid replay, still trying to learn.
Broad France.
There's the matters with my colleagues. When the fever leaves, when the fever leaves, that's when the fever leaves, when the fever leaves, that's when the levee breaks. It's what you're leaving. Each morning, trying to when you in my soul. Next thing I know, finding it's possible to be with pain. Leave me in the story. I'm finished. You think about tomorrow. You wake you again. Watch me be that man again. Quality of mercy is not strange, but it falls from the heavens like a gentle rain. You know, let it rain, let it pour, then storm some more, start up. God, let it rain, let it pour, then make it storm some more, start a flood. Wash away my blood. But it wash away my blood. My blood. Lost my shape, trying to casual and stop. I might end up in the hospital, changing my shape. I feel like an accident. Well, I to explain my experience. Waiting on. Let's see. I'm ready to relate. I push me back in front of me. Turn that face seems to me. Think that no information left of any kind. Lifting my head, looking for the danger signs. There was a lot. Sharp as a knife. There was a lot. Sharp as a knife. The island of God. It's like a case of medicine. Working by Einstein. Got the message from the oxygen. Find a opportunity. Back time is something in my feeling green. Lifting my hand. Inside. Like what's way down. From the bar, something good. Talk my friend down. Hold on, give up. Looks like looks. I'm not off out my blood. How many single
Thank you.
That's okay.
Test 1, 2. Hey, if we could everybody take their seats again, we're going to get started with the second half here in a second. I'm glad they sort of like the review. Yeah. I appreciate you telling me that. I'll send you the reviews tonight. Absolutely. Yeah, happy to do it.
Out in this town, there's a joke going round, and everyone's in a few. The face that craves the constantly amazed at the things you say and do. He lies, steals, cheats on you, and comes back in the end. You say, man, I'll do anything you want. Don't leave me again. Hey, Colin.
All right, everybody, please take a seat. We're going to get started again. Don't make me have to start calling out your names and embarrassing you for not sitting down. Barbara.
Playing it tit for tat. Well, I don't mean to get on in the air, but I think you're better than that. He'll hold you down and pin you down and make you hollow it. You say, man, I'll do anything you want. Don't leave me again.
All right, so we didn't do anything to their audio. We didn't. Oh, no, we didn't.
All right. Everybody take a seat, settle down. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to backstage the Urban Verbs.
I didn't turn the power off.
And,
All righty.
audio.
Do what to Roddy?
He said,
Eek, how scary is that?
oh,
1, 2, 3, 4. Is that Robin Rose I detect?
What is yours doing? It's running away.
Okay. Well, now that we've put the Rolling
Cookies.
Stone review behind us,
Mm.
um,
Your name is.
and I do want to just add that, again, the Flaming Mascara album, limited edition, red vinyl, on sale here. And I omitted one of the members of the Flaming Proof Mascara, Danny Frankel is on that as well. So we appreciate that. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to do a couple audience questions and run through a few more. Who wants to tell us where the name Urban Verbs came from?
That's got Roddy.
Roddy?
Yeah, I had a girlfriend named Carol Blizzard back when we were first starting the band, and Carol and I were sitting around my loft one night.
I think Carol's here, so be careful what you say.
Oh, well,
She
I,
left.
They went
I have
home.
nothing but good things to say. But we were sitting around my loft one night as Urban Verbs were starting to gather some speed. And the first time we played as the No Name Band at the Atlantis building because we hadn't settled on a name yet. So, so, so that night at the Atlantis building, I went out and announced, "We're the Urban Verbs. How are you tonight?" or something like that. But I put the flag in the ground, and I think it was a good name. I mean, I always thought it was a good name, but
Were there other names in consideration?
I
I'm
remember
sure that there were. I don't know.
Chroma Key, you remember that? That was one that Robin came up with because of the color. CHROMA, Chroma.
Guilty.
Another audience question. They want to know about the recording sessions that you did for the two albums. And I know in speaking to all of you before now, you talked about the difference between the Urban Verbs live and the Urban Verbs recorded. What were the recording sessions like? Was that a good experience?
It depends. Isn't there good and bad and everything? I mean, it was just different. In New York, Mike Thorne, who I like a lot, was very much more in control of every little second, literally, like I said, changing all the strings of the guitars every single time. And then you're setting the intonation. It took forever. He was like that, but he was really friendly and we were all in there. Georgia was a lot wilder. A lot more drugs, whole lot more drugs, where you come in and they had those 2-inch film, whatever, the recording tape, the really big fat guys, and they'd be covered with coke. And you'd be like, well, look at that.
Shocked.
Well, the thing is, we actually stopped doing it because it got to be too much. I wasn't doing it anyway at that point, but you get crazy with that much. It really makes you don't speed up. You decide to kill yourself or something.
Now,
Linda?
one of you told me the story about going to the Watergate Hotel to sign the contract.
I did.
That's what we did.
Is that
yeah.
Robin?
Yeah,
Tell
totally.
us about that experience.
Bob-
Speaking of cocaine.
Yeah, Bob Krasnow was the vice president of Warner Brothers on the East Coast. And he'd been involved in the West Coast thing for a long time. He was involved in Captain Beefheart's career. And then he had Shaka Khan and he signed the Who or somebody else, but he was a real super savvy record executive and a very cool guy. I really liked Bob a lot. We would hang out with him and he liked us for some reason. I never got it. Linda, remember we went to Bob's house in Bel Air and he says, "I'm gonna make you guys the best hamburger you've ever had." And so, do you remember this, Linda, when the place that
It was outdoors.
yeah, it was outdoors, yeah. And it was the best I'd ever had. I mean, it was like Wagyu beef or something. It was something like it back in, it's Los Angeles, for God's sake, it's got to be good. So Bob was this kind of a really interesting guy and he loved art. And one day we were talking about, no, let me get back to the Watergate. He shows up in town to sign the band, right? So we're going to sign with the contract. And I remember walking, he had one of these suites, like, up on overlooking the Potomac, and it was fairly large. And I remember Bob sitting there with his white linen suit and a 5-carat diamond stick pin, and old school in a white linen shirt, kind of unbuttoned, and the guy, he looked the part. And I remember the urban verbs file in, like Somnambulist, we walking in like, what do we do now, and everybody was sitting around in a kind of a semicircle. And I noticed over next to Bob was a coffee table, and there was this big white mound that it looked like sugar, for 10 feet away. And so that contract was going to get signed one way or the other. And Bob was used to dealing with people like Bootsy Collins, right? But nobody, Bootsy not going to sign anything without hitting the table first. And we were just kind of sitting there. And I don't think he ever had met rock and roll people like us before, because we were like reserved. Is that a term maybe that fits? Or more Washingtonian? We were like less wild and crazy like the New Yorkers. And so, and I think I remember he kept looking over like this, like, anybody want to get up and come over and take a hit, and and we're just all staring out the window of the Potomac River thinking, oh God, what have we signed up for, True story.
They're all true stories,
Yeah,
right?
they are, yeah.
But look, as I said before, don't let the facts get in the way of a good story. So
Revisionism is the ultimate hobby of Washington.
And what, Ronnie, let me ask you, what was that like? So you're opening at CBGB's for The Water, a band from New Jersey. You do 2 nights. The second night, Sharon Conway, a writer for the Washington Post, wrote a fabulous piece, really just a deep dive, really well-researched piece about that show, and then the subsequent recordings with Brian Eno. So what was that like? And when we heard this record, Eno, or the recording from those sessions, Eno was singing on that song as well. What was that whole experience like with Brian Eno?
The Eno experience, is that the question?
Well, or the Brian Eno experience.
It was like being shot out of a cannon. We were a brand new band. We were playing in New York for the first time. And one of the hottest producers in the world comes running in to see us, but he also ran out before any of us could meet him or talk to him. And it was heartbreaking. I thought maybe he really didn't like the music at all. But then the next morning, a bicycle messenger showed up with the letter that you referred to earlier. And, he made a very gracious offer in that letter. And I think if he and David Byrne hadn't been developing their relationship at the time, we would have done our first album with Brian Eno, which would have changed the world. I mean, changed our worlds.
Well, he did change your world, regardless of whether you
he did.
produced your
He did.
album, right? I
You're
mean,
right. You're right.
He really did. And there are bands that labor for decades and don't get that kind of break. You had, as you I think have said before, had only been together for 9 months, and you strike gold.
It was magical. I mean, there's just no other way to describe it. We founded a nightclub. We got a place to practice for no money in the basement, and we started making inroads in the Washington D.C. music scene. And I just want to say this: there are a lot of really great people in the Washington D.C. music scene, and I'm thinking of Marshall Keith and Abad Barron, and maybe half a dozen other people that I could name. And so we didn't do this all in a vacuum. We didn't do this all by ourselves. We had, people who'd been at it for a long time, working alongside of us and contributing their input to what became the Washington music scene.
Let me ask you about, and anyone can chime in on this, about the B-52s. You guys were playing with the B-52s before they had their first record, I believe.
That's right. Yeah.
And so, what was that like, and what was your relationship like with the B-52s?
Well, some of them slept.
By the way, this B-52s posters being auctioned off up here, very reasonable collector's item. Money goes to a great nonprofit. Just saying.
A couple of the B-52s slept on the floor of my apartment at 21st and P, sharing it was a big apartment. And they were great. They wanted to go thrift storing
Yeah,
and
fun
they were
people.
totally fun and
Fun.
very unaffected. Seemed to just love doing what they were doing. And so we made the second album in Atlanta. You had a little better idea of what the music scene was down there. I mean, it was around the colleges, it was hot and it was fun. They were a lot of fun. I liked them. And then they went on to great stardom with a song I can't stand, but you know, I can't help it. I like lobsters somehow.
You like
Linda,
dogs too. You had a dog.
Yeah, Jack, he was a big dog. He was an Irish setter golden retriever mix. Stood about this tall and he weighed 90 some pounds. And he went on tour with us. And when we built our practice space on whatever that street was, Church Street or whatever, we built a stage. And then underneath it was a place for Jack to go in there and we insulated it from sound so he could be with the band and not be upset by the volume, which was considerable.
Did-
And he was great. He went
Did
with
Jack
us.
get earplugs too?
Well, that was a problem. I couldn't get him, you know, he had the floppy ears. He was like, no way. But so we had to do it for him and we did that. You probably had a lot to do.
Let me
with it.
ask you, and anybody can chime in here, and I don't know if Neil Augenstein is here, and we really want to appreciate Neil Augenstein, a great reporter at WTOP Radio, but also centric to the DC music, the mod music scene with his band Modest Proposal. Well, he interviewed Roddy and did a great piece that you can find on WTOP.com. He also has created a Facebook page for those of us still on Facebook, dedicated to the Hall of Nations concert. Is this a picture from Hall of Nations right here? On the bottom left, yeah. Who wants to tell us about that? That was Bob Boylan, by the way, who produced the Hall of Nations show and talked about it when he was here for Backstage. But you guys played that show opening up for the Cramps.
It was great. They opened up for us.
They opened up for you.
Yes,
Oh, that's
sir.
right. So how did that go for you?
It was
Stepping
another,
on stage
a
after that.
third band too, called the
Yeah,
Mums.
the Mumps, right.
local band.
Yeah, so they did, and then the Cramps, and then we came out,
Yeah.
so it was wild. I mean, the
Is that
city was
right, Bob?
completely nuts.
That's right. Yeah.
You guys almost stepped in the vomit of.
Yeah.
Yeah, tell us about that, Linda.
Well, he threw up on the mic and I'm thinking, ugh, I do, you know, backups. Ugh. But they did have another mic. They managed to find one, you know, whatever happened on the floor, I don't remember. But my sister and I were standing kind of in the back, waiting to go on. And then someone comes and asks me if I have a Tampax. And I'm thinking, is that Lux who needs it or who needs it? And I did actually have one
For poison ivy.
in
though,
my
right?
base case.
Say
I think it was for poison ivy.
Probably for Lux and poison
I
ivy.
didn't
but, you
ask.
know,
I
where-
handed it over. Anyone wants it, it's yours. And that's kind of what I did. So that was that.
Yeah.
But it was a really fun gig. We
Freak
played, we
scene.
just tore it up. It's really fun. I mean, you play a lot and some of them are just really fun and really good. You're just so together and everybody's going crazy. And that was one of those, I thought.
Another question from the audience, and maybe Bob Boylan is best to answer this. What happened to the album that was supposed to be made from the show at the 930 Club about 10 years ago? Is that on NPR?
It was more than 10 years ago. It was in the
I think
90s.
the concert that NPR
What's this
broadcast
year?
that,
What?
I've never known about an album.
No,
But
I didn't.
there's certainly, I think the concert's still online. You can make your own album.
I don't know. I think that's
There you go.
Yeah.
Send your residuals to Bob and Roddy.
on here.
Yeah.
And then somebody asks about Bart.
Here.
Who was Bart
That's
and
there.
where is Bart now?
Yeah, I think
Black
we
Bart.
lost him.
Yeah,
They
he
had
was great.
Black Bart, I think his real name was Ron Boykin,
Mhm.
kind of like a crew guy, roadie
Roadie
type
guy.
guy for us. Yeah, really, like,
But he was just a
Ed
nice
can-
guy, really nice. He
Ed
went-
Casey back there knows about Bart.
Yeah, he would know.
Yeah, Ed was our sound guy, and Bart and Ed traveled with us to Chicago. Remember that one? And the guy ran to the Danny towards your drum to stick his head in the drum, and Bart caught him halfway and threw the guy out of the off the dance floor. The guy
Oh,
kept
that
spinning
was
off the
Chicago.
dance floor. Yeah, it was
People
really
were
scary.
dancing on the tables and
Yeah,
falling
yeah,
over.
that was crazy.
And we stayed with them. a
And
couple
your
days.
SVT had to go up that staircase that was like that. And these guys, well, you remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah, King Tut's Club or something like that. What was it? Tut,
It
whatever.
had a
Oh, in
different name.
Chicago?
It was almost
Yeah,
a
Tut's.
vertical staircase with
Yeah,
a
it was
140-pound
bumping,
amplifier
yeah.
having to go straight up.
It was really hot, like a sauna. It was
Yeah,
a
yeah.
sauna.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then they had a
Uh,
heavy amp.
Linda, you told me, and I know how you love to dominate a conversation on
Mhm.
stage because
Mhm.
you have
That's
no-
why I have this bottle. Yeah,
That's why that's
that's my
there?
little.
Go at it. You told me about playing for the Vice President of the United States.
That's right. I'm sure we all remember Roddy and everybody. And we, I think the guy, their son, Walter and Joan's son, liked our band. He heard us at the Child Herald a couple of times. And so they decided they had a big fancy dinner at the mansion up there at the observatory on Mass Ave. And they wanted to thank all the artists who had donated art to the government, whatever, I don't even remember when or where. It was going to be Oink Oink City. And so we go and we bring our rental truck and we have our stuff in it. And we're starting to unload and they, wait a minute, the security guys come running out and they have these bomb sniffing dogs or drug sniffing dogs, whatever they were. And they're all around and we're
Sniffing
supposed to
dogs.
stand back and we do that. And Joan Mondale is
Rollerblading,
rollerblading
yeah.
in the driveway and she's just the coolest thing.
She was
She's
very
like,
arty,
little
Joan.
turns and she, oh, you guys have fun, whatever. And
Right.
so then we're starting to do the sound check. And there was a woman, I think, was sort of in charge, and she comes out and goes, it's just so loud. But could you leave one of your combo at home? And I'm thinking, well, maybe you don't understand, but we don't have a combo. This is it. And so anyway, she sort of has to, run away. And we go through this thing. We come for the gig. They make us go into a bathroom. It's a big bathroom. It has a sofa. And we're tuning up in there. And then behind the little door is the toilet. And so we're in there. And then they say, okay, come on out. We come out. We start the song. And we were starting the set with Luca Brasi, my absolute all-time favorite song. It starts with bass and drums. And it's pretty there. And we were loud. So we start. And Danny and I are doing it. And Robert's doing his tinkly thing. And people literally got up and were running out of the tent like, oh my God, what is it? Why didn't they leave one of their combo at home? And they're running out. And I thought it was funny. And so I'm thinking, oh man, this is great. And she gets up, Joan gets up, and then she asked.
Frank Stella jumped up
Was
and
that
grabbed
what
her
it
by the
was?
hand and started boogieing
Yeah,
with her
and they start
to
dancing.
the world's most unboogable
To the,
song.
yeah,
Can't
Luca
boogie to Luca
Brasi,
Brasi,
kind of weird, but they're
It
doing
was-
it. And everybody else suddenly goes, oh, wait, maybe
It's
it's
like-
really hip. And they
like
come
the
running
Queen.
back in.
And then they're all out.
I was like,
But
and we killed it. We just
Both Washington.
killed it. It was
yeah,
great.
we
We
did
did a great
straight
gig.
through, no fear.
But then we're done and it's like, okay, get back
No.
in the bathroom. So we go back in the bathroom and we're standing around in there like, well, now what? And we can hear tinkling glasses, whatever. And then Walter Mondale comes in, he goes, what are you doing in here? And we're like, well, that's what the security people said to do. And he goes, well, that's ridiculous. Go on out there and have fun. Or that's, he used a swear
It
word.
was like half
He
shake.
swear-
God obviously just gotten up. It was about noon, wasn't it, Linda,
I
or
think
something?
he looked kind of normal, but he went into the bathroom to use it. Maybe he wasn't normal. I don't know.
No, he was just
looked normal to
kind
me.
of a really friendly, funky guy. I mean, I was
Great.
surprised.
So out
man.
we went and stood around and looked at all the weirdy artists and they looked at us and then we got to go home, getting our things and leave.
Yeah.
But it was different.
Roddy, I want to give you a chance to talk a little bit about Flameproof Mascara, about the album, the collaboration. What was the genesis of this? Tell us a little bit about Flameproof.
Well, I hadn't written any songs for a pretty long while, at least not anything that I was happy with. And out of the blue, I just started writing song lyrics again, and I thought some of them were pretty good. And I thought, who could I get as musicians on this album? And I have always liked the guitar playing of Marshall Keith, and I also like Abad Durham's guitar playing a great deal. So I called Marshall. I said, Marshall, how would you like to play in a band with me and Abad? And Marshall said, I've never played with Abad, but I've always wanted to. And so I called Abad and said, Abad, how would you like to be in a band with me and Marshall? And Abad said, well, I've never played with Marshall, but I've always wanted to. And so it was, the world's briefest audition. And we started getting together out at Marshall's house in, I think it's Walker's Point, Maryland. And he had recording equipment there. He has a small studio that he maintains. And we began recording these songs. And I at least think they're really good. I mean, they're not like anything else that's out there right now. They're very original, in my opinion.
And so as I look at Abad and Marshall in the front row here, and I ask you, and Danny here as well, and I ask you this question, will we see a live show from Flameproof Mascara?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we just have to map it out. But there will be a number of live shows occurring.
Well, we look forward to that. Let me get back to a couple more audience questions. And Roddy, I'll throw this at you. What do you think would have happened if Urban Verbs had stayed together, if they had stayed together a few more years than they did? Roddy?
Yeah, I don't think things would have turned out any different. It wasn't like there was a big reappraisal of the Urban Verbs going on after we broke up. I mean, this article by your friend it was like being shot in the head with a shotgun. You don't get up and walk again after that. I mean, it really killed us. It was a decisive blow, and nothing that could come afterwards was going to undo that awful review.
Robin, we have a question here from the audience. Somebody who remembers riding in a black limousine with you and somebody from Warner Brothers, a producer. But they ask, is there a favorite show that nobody knows about that we haven't talked about?
Well, I think for me, it was playing what is it, Mobehi Gardens? Is that, say that right, Danny, in San Francisco? Is it called the Mobehi or Mobehi Gardens or whatever?
With the Plastics, right? That band from Japan.
Yeah.
I thought we played Berkeley Square.
We played that, but we
and
played in,
another place by the
We played the
Pyramid
Roxy.
Building.
no, we played in
Yeah,
town in
yeah,
San
yeah,
Francisco.
yeah,
I always
Kelly's.
thought the San Francisco,
and that's not-
it's more like, to LA what Washington is to New York. And I just, in my mind, by the way, I'd been to San Francisco a long time ago when it was the San Francisco most people read about. And I was thinking, well, wow, maybe it's going to be like that again. It wasn't quite like that again, but it's a real music town. And I just remember, I thought that the Verbs have it's a little bit of a mystical sound. There's a lot of stuff going on that's subliminal, and I just thought, well, the Frisco people are going to get it. I didn't expect the LA people to get it, but I figured the San Francisco people would get it. And I kept looking at the audience that are playing, and I was seeing people get it, and it was like, wow, they got it. But the thing that made it really interesting is that Robert, by the time, let's talk about Robert just a little bit here. Robert had a very serious kidney ailment from a child. He had congenital kidney problems. And we were flying Robert from gig to gig. Roddy, remember this? Robert
Yeah.
was flying. And so
Sure.
Robert shows up in San Francisco and goes straight into dialysis.
Well, he did that all over.
Yeah. And then would meet us for sound check. I mean, Robert's will was just like unbelievable. I've never met anybody in my entire life to this day that had the kind of willpower that Robert had. And I think that's one of the reasons to be honest, Robert survived as long as he did. He just controlled himself so well. And I remember in my mind, it was a great gig. And when you asked me, that would be the gig for me. And it was Mobehi. Anybody out here know the Bay Area? Gardens was the name of the club. And it was where the residents used to play there and a lot of bands like that,
But he said the band had interlocking.
Neurosis.
Yeah, that's how we all bonded.
That's how they responded. That's what people said about the band. These are a bunch of people with an interlocking neuroses.
Roddy,
And what
you
they've
talk
created.
about being a poet, starting out at AU and creative writing. One of the things you told me that I really just loved it when it came out of your words, when you described your writing, you told me there's a rhythm to the words I write, which that phrase in itself to me is poetic.
You were
Um,
asking me how Robert and I wrote music.
Yes.
And you also asked me if I played any instruments, and I don't, unfortunately. But because there is a rhythm to the words I write, Robert was able to decipher that and then conform his music to uplift the lyrics. I always felt Robert's music made my lyrics better. And that's what I meant by a rhythm to it, because he would use that as a starting place. And I mean, he was just great to work with. He was an amazing guy. I worked with him for 15 years, and we never had a harsh word for each other, which is unusual for musicians.
There is a note. This will be the second apology I read to you today, Roddy. This is from, there's not a question in here, but this person took great pains to write a very long note here. But the gist of it is that he met a girl, he fell in love, he wanted to write her a poem, and words escaped him. So he sent her the lyrics to "The Only One of You." He wants to, and she never caught on. Will go to her grave believing those were his words. He wants to apologize for appropriating your words, but it was in this for the sake of love. So I'm guessing you're okay with that.
Yeah, I survived.
How about the whistle for the pension building show? Who remembers that?
I remember someone threw a bag of poop on the stage. Yeah, and Roddy, it was in a bag, it was plastic, it was clean, and he just threw it back. That's how I remember. I mean, it was wild. It was such a huge space, and we were set up kind of right in the middle, as I recall, and a lot of, pretty crowded, but the place was huge, just
There was
huge.
an 8-second decay mark because of the height of the atrium in that building. So Linda would play the last bass note of a song, and it would vibrate around for 8 seconds. I mean, it was possibly the most psychedelic show I ever did.
Yeah, right.
For that reason.
It was fun.
So if I'm to believe everything on online that I read about the band, you guys played crowds from just 7 people in Lubbock, Texas, to
Maybe
15,000 people in Italy. Who wants to talk about that Texas show?
It was in Lubbock, right?
Well, we were driving down and we were staying in some motel that was right next to the club. They had no idea at all.
Oh, Lincoln,
I
Nebraska.
know, and it was sort of,
That was one.
I think we did a pretty good job. I remember liking the music, but it was a beat. A lot of they do Airstreams there. I think that's their big deal.
Yeah.
So there were lots of Airstreams. You remember that? We should have been in an
I
Airstream.
think I
but we
got
weren't.
this from, I'll cite my source on this one. I think I got this from a Joe Sassby interview, perhaps from City Paper. And I think maybe it was you, Roddy, who told him that the thing you took away from that was this farmer from Nebraska.
Yeah.
Who drove all the way to see the band.
He drove one of those huge tractors,
It's
as
a
wide as this
combine.
thing,
Combine.
and had his headphones on. And he had something, I don't know, it was like,
It was urban verbs.
yeah,
with
on
a-
his
with
tattooed
a-
on his hand.
With a
And
prison
the guy
tattoo.
driving
what
up
you
and
do it
down
with
the,
a ballpoint pen, and he comes in and we're in this trailer thing near a Kmart somewhere.
that was our
And,
fan, man.
God, I mean, he comes out and he wants to talk to us and we're all sort of like, wow, how normal is he? I don't know. But I was pretty impressed. I mean, it all fit. He had it all on there.
He was out there on the plains for a long time.
He listened to music the whole time he's in the combine, just
Yeah,
grinding around through cornfields. or whatever.
fantastic fan. That's what you want. You
And
want
so-
a fan that,
At some point, Robin and Linda, you both leave the band.
Mhm.
True.
Why did you guys leave the band?
Well, I really was there to have fun. I was with the least amount of investment in it, other than, hey, learn how to do this. This is fun. And when it stopped seeming fun to me, that's when it was time to walk out. So I did.
Robin?
It was, for me, it's similar to Linda, but for me, it was a little more complicated. I think that when Robert's illness got really bad, it realized that we weren't going to be able to tour. And not touring meant that we probably weren't going to have a record company backing us up, right? I mean, and I kind of saw the Urban Verbs as the ultimate artistic experience, you know, sort of an adventure, you know, like a project, if nothing else. But it kind of reached the point for me where as I realized I was kind of missing the art world where I could go down and be in the studio by myself and there's no noise and no crazy people running around with their hands tattooed Urban Verbs. And for me, I just said, you know, you got no one to hold them, no one to fold them, you know, and I just said it was time for me to go. And Roddy and Robert were kind of strategizing the music in a different direction, I think, to be honest, right, Rod?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think that for me, it was no bad blood or anything. It was just time for me to go back and do kind of my other things. So that's what I did. And Linda and I kind of did it at the same time because I think we were joined at the same time, you know.
And I knew they could find another bass player. I mean, it was a popular band.
And Roddy, you did find another bass player.
Yep, Billy Swan, I think. Is that his name?
Who,
Yeah,
who,
Billy Swan.
Billy Swan.
Billy Swan?
You from that band, the Muffins?
Right.
What would you call it? Like a prog rock band, experimental? I think from Rockville.
Yeah.
Yeah, Billy Swan, that Robert referred to as a psychotic dentist and menace. But he was a good guy. He wear blue jeans and no socks and those tassel regions. Billy, our man.
He played with no shirt.
You guys went
Sure.
over, Roddy, you guys went over to Italy to tour for a couple of weeks with Billy Swan, is that right? And is that where you played to one of your biggest crowds?
He might not hear you.
Roddy?
Hey, Rod.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was spacing out.
That's okay. I have a hard time holding people's attention who are in the same room with me. Hundreds of miles away. But talk about touring Italy, and I think you played to a crowd of 15,000 people in it.
Italy was where the magic came back, I thought. We were really well received everywhere we went in Italy. We had fans who followed us from the northern part of Italy down around the boot to Rome. And it was not as hard touring in Italy. Danny, did you think? Somehow it was easier.
Yeah.
I don't know. It struck me
I
as
think so.
being easier.
We played with Poly Rock and Liquid Poly Rock, but then Liquid in that Bologna show. But
We also
I
played.
think it was okay.
We also played the fortress at the top of the mountain overlooking Naples Harbor. And we were there on the day when the Seventh Fleet pulled in. And I was sitting at a cafe on the side of this hillside mountain and watching the Seventh Fleet pull in and let out their anchors. And there were 3 fighter jets that took off from one of the aircraft carriers, and they flew right down the middle of the main drag in Naples, upside down. I mean, it was a real aerobatic feat. It was also very loud. And that night we played in front of a lot of off-duty sailors and Marines at the fortress at the top of Naples, which was built, I don't know, probably in the 1400s. And they had built it in such a way that there was a section of the tunnel leading up to the fortress itself that would collapse in on any invaders if they were unfortunate enough to be in that section of the tunnel. So Italy for me was just an eye-opening experience. And like I said, I really enjoyed it.
Robin, you had mentioned Robert's health and him having to fly ahead of the band to get dialysis and to keep up with the band. Tell us a little bit about the Merriweather Post show opening up for the Cars.
Well, that's what I remember.
Devo, wasn't the car?
See,
Devo.
Linda and Danny said it was Devo. I remember it was the Cars.
Well,
Again, let's not let the facts get
Does
in the way of
anybody
the
know?
story. It was some other band.
Revisionism, you know?
Well, let them vote. Who wants Devo?
Well, that's,
Okay. Who wants the Cars?
yeah.
Whoa, Devo has it. Devo has it. I think it was
So
Devo.
tell us about
So-
that show and the impact it had on you.
Well, I didn't,
Well, huh.
frankly, none of us, did you know, Danny? I don't think any of us knew that Robert was having
No.
quite the severe problems
Well,
that he was having.
He
And
dropped his guitar. I mean, that was one sign that he was
Yeah.
pretty
he'd be
something.
putting the guitar on and he had to,
We were opening, so we're in there and, you know, I don't know, he sort of hadn't put it on right.
lot of
It
people.
Sort of falls down and being Robert, he picks it up and then we do the set and we did a great set. It was really fun and all that stuff and the weirdness of eating out there with whatever. But, then the next day, that was it, Robert.
Tim
was
called
having-
me at midnight.
yeah.
He said, I said, what's going on, Tim? Why are you calling? He said, Robert's in the hospital. I said, why? And he said, they're not sure he's going to make it.
Yeah, that was it.
Roddy, do you remember that?
Yeah, yeah.
And that was the beginning of when Robert's kidney problems really started. And that was in a kind of a way that, you know, that was, you know, pretty decisive for us because touring is, you know, the way you get your music out there, you know, and meant that we really couldn't tour unabated. We had problems. We had to logistically organize everything so Robert could fly or take buses and meet us there to perform. And, you know, it's a kind of a sad thing. I mean, as Robert was the leader of our band and Roddy and Robert were really close together. And we all worked really close together. Danny's thing, the interlocking neurosis is absolutely true, you know, but I think when Robert's health got really bad, that was a real problem for the band.
Roddy, do you want to talk a little bit about the end of the band? And I mean, we had Robin Inland have left, but you still toured Italy with Billy Swan, and then take us through the end.
Yeah, when we toured Italy, I think we were there for 10 days, maybe 2 weeks. And we started up in Bologna in northern Italy and went down all the way around the Boot, playing cities along the way. We ended up in Rome playing a gig, and it just occurred to both me and Robin, or rather, I'm sorry, Robin, me and Robert, that it was never going to get any better than that, you know, particularly with Robert's ill health. He would go to hospitals in Italy and he would, this may gross some people out, but he would put the rubber strap on his arm and he would put the, what do they call it for changing blood? You know, he had to have his blood. Yeah, he'd put the dialysis needles in his own arm. And the nurses at certain hospitals just thought that was the sexiest thing they'd ever seen. So he had some nurses affairs, but it wasn't going to get any better than what we experienced in Italy. And I was not interested in going on as a, you know, 4-piece band, because like I said at the beginning, we all became really close. You know, we were working really closely together. And when, frankly, when Linda and Robin left, it left a huge gap in the urban verbs. And we were never quite able to fill that up. We had Billy Swan come in on bass, and Billy's a wonderfully capable bass player, but he's also gravitates to a little different sort of music than what we were making. And we went to Italy with Billy and did a couple of other gigs around the US, but nothing outstanding really.
As we wrap up here, let me start with you, Danny. Catch people up with what you're doing today.
Like a lot of varied stuff. After the Verbs, I was playing with the Flying Karamazov Brothers, a theater troupe. That was really cool. A lot of different types of theater gigs. We memorized a Stravinsky piece, Le Soir de Soldat, for the Brooklyn Academy of Music, and then we did Comedy of Errors. I was in the band that supports the Jugglers. It was really fun. And then after that, yeah, they went for like 8 years, and then after that, 7 years with Katie Lang. And that was really fun. She's a really great person and really, and a lot of record stuff, like the first Fiona Apple record and
Michael Penn, come on.
Michael Penn. That led to Lou Reed for like 3 years. And then
Yeah.
it's funny when I moved to LA, I got connected with a lot of New York things. Like, I don't know how, like Lou Reed and then John Cale record, and then Laurie Anderson and Hal Wilner, who does all his theme records. I got involved in a lot of that. And today, different stuff. I'll be in the new Joker movie. It comes out like next October. And then in the desert where we live, there's this great recording studio, and I did something with Butch Vig. They're the Nirvana guy, and for a drum library, and then stuff in LA. I like to stay varied with like homemade percussion or drums and percussion.
You go back
Hi.
and forth, right?
Yeah, go
Yeah.
back and forth.
Yeah.
And Robin, how
I
about
like
you?
to
Where,
come
where do,
back.
where do people find you these days?
Yeah. In my studio, usually, I mean, I spend a lot of time in my studio. I'm painting. By the way, I've decided to do commissions, but I'm doing different kind of commissions now. I'm not doing corporate commission. I'm doing commissions for people. I want to, you know, I have two things I just did in Florida, and I kind of interview the person and say, okay, what do you like? What don't you like? What colors do you like? What, texture do you like? What do you, stuff like that. I'm kind of trying to reinvent myself, and because for years I've shown in art galleries and museums and stuff. And that's a very, it's almost like being a contractor building a house on spec. And it's not impersonal. It's just that, I look at it like I'm making I don't know, like Sergeant Pepper's. I start and I create like 12 paintings that crosstalk, and they interact as an ensemble, not just individually. But I've decided now that I want to do things that are so absolutely within reach, close at hand, that they're ultimately individual, meaning me making something specifically for someone. And this sounds like suicide in the art world, because it's like, nobody wants to hear that. Your art dealers don't want to hear it, But I've just, I've kind of earned my gold watch kind of, and this is where I am now. So that's kind of what I'm doing. I'm also working on another just complete exhibition. Once that's done, then I'll try to find some venue for it. My gallery in New York closed, so I don't have a New York gallery anymore. So I've kind of like pulled back a little bit, but I have become a rock hound. So let's extend that a little bit further. I've got a diamond saw, I've got tumblers, I can grind, I've got a flat lap and stuff. And so you might see jewelry coming out of me pretty soon, little teeny things, right?
Sell it on there.
Instead of big stuff.
And
you have to
Linda,
move
how
around.
about you? What are you up to these days?
Well, I was raised in Kensington by a journalist father and a French teacher mother. And my dad's motto for us was, do it for pleasure, it pays off in the end, which when we were growing up wasn't that common. And I don't know if it's true, but that's still what I'm trying to do. I mean, I just think life is short. I'm lucky. I was born with a lot of friends and family and support. I happen to love animals. I happen to live on a farm that's been there for a really long time with the same family. We all get along. We don't fight, whatever. And that's what I'm trying to do, is do whatever drawing I want to do. I see something, I love that. Ooh, I'll paint that, draw that. No one cares. I just do what I want. And that's kind of what I always wanted to do. Only now I get to do it.
Sounds like what you've always been doing.
Pretty much. What I want. So.
Roddy,
Very good,
I'm
Linda.
going to give you the last word. We know you have the Flameproof Mascara project. Let me ask you the question on everybody's mind here. Will we see the urban verbs ever get back together again?
Not way.
No, Robert Goldstein is no longer able to play guitar, and there is no urban verbs without Robert Goldstein.
Absolutely.
So unfortunately, no. I appreciate the question, but I've thought about it, and I'm sure my bandmates have thought about it. It wouldn't be the urban verbs without Robert Goldstein.
But they're two good albums.
But there are two
Get
great
them and
albums.
play them. They're fun.
Well, Roddy, Linda, Robin, Danny. We appreciate you guys getting back together for us for this afternoon and sharing your stories with us. Ladies and gentlemen, the Urban Verbs.
Happening, we can't hear this off the mic. Everyone's quiet. I'm sure they are. Maybe they're asleep.
That was good.
Hello.
All right, we got through it.
For you, Ryan, see?
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thanks. Well, I think it's a great thing you do here, so that's cool.
Still
Ah, turn it off.
You did a great
off.
job. Really.
Was that a question for me?
no, I think they just turned it off. We didn't do
No,
anything.
Linda said.
Yeah, they just turned it off. Let me do this just in case somebody, we can kind of keep it on.
No, let's keep it on for a minute, just watch them.
That guy looks familiar.
Battery low.
Was that this thing?
Yeah.
Oh, good. I wasn't sure how that was gonna last. It's all, it's all charged. It's not, there's no batteries. And this is the first time I ever used it, so I didn't know how long.
Hey, don't forget the silent auction for these posters is still going on. All the money goes to a great worthy cause here at the Palisades Hub. And flame-proof mascaras, limited red vinyl over here. Get yours. I'm sure the artist would love to sign it for you.
All right, Rodney, I'm turning it off. I don't think,
Battery low. Power off.
look, we just made it.
Yeah,
The thing just ran out of juice.
yeah, I see that.
All right,